All right, welcome everyone. Today we're diving deep into men's roles and all that. Marriage, society, the whole deal. You guys seem really interested in this red pill view, challenging modern feminism and all that. So, we've got Conrad Riker's book, Man's Guide to a Fulfilling Marriage and Family Life. Strong opinions in this one.
Yeah, no kidding. Right from the start, Riker's speaking directly to men. The preface, he lays it out. Those guys who feel disillusioned, almost attacked even, by how masculinity is viewed these days.
You're right, he cuts right to the chase. No sugarcoating. This book's for men who are done with just accepting things. What he calls the blue pill, right, Kindoi? They're ready for that other perspective.
It's almost like a manual, for men seeking that biblical foundation for being husbands, fathers, the whole bit.
He definitely sets that serious tone.
And it gets personal, too. In introduction, Riker talks about his own life. His defiant wife made him feel, well, emasculated.
That's a tough spot.
It is, and it all ties into this red pill thing. Maybe we should explain that a bit for those not familiar.
Definitely. Think of the Matrix. Taking the red pill means seeing reality for what it is, no matter how tough it is, instead of living in that comfy illusion.
Right, exactly. And Riker argues a lot of men are stuck in that blue pill illusion about how society really operates.
Okay, so he's saying that men are actually at a disadvantage because of how things are set up, structures, ideologies, that kind of thing.
Exactly, especially what he calls modern feminism. Tipping the scales. He even uses terms like female supremacist society.
Wow, that's strong stuff. Some people might find that provocative for sure.
It is, but for guys who feel like traditional roles have been undermined, this book, it speaks to them.
It makes sense. It's validating their experiences.
Riker even connects the rise of feminism, which he says has Marxist roots, to the breakdown of traditional family.
So he's going pretty deep here. For those who need a refresher, Marxism's about class struggle and power. Riker believes some feminists have adopted that framework, leading to this imbalance between the genders as he sees it.
Good summary. Now, in Chapter 2, he gets specific. Historical examples of feminism's impact, he says. Hookup culture, rising divorce rates, legal systems favoring women, custody battles, alimony, all that.
I can see how this would hit home for some men, especially those who feel burned by those systems.
Absolutely. It's like he's giving voice to their frustrations. He says it's all a symptom of moving away from those traditional roles and the values they represent.
Interesting. So then he goes into those roles in detail.
You got it. Chapter 3, he lays it out. Man as head of the household, woman as the heart. That's his view.
He's saying this is the ideal structure, the best for everyone.
More than that, he connects it to biology, evolution. Says men are naturally inclined to lead, physically stronger, protective instincts.
He even challenges the idea of female supremacy, says it can be harmful to men, mentally, to their self-esteem. That's not a perspective you hear every day.
Not at all. He's saying society needs to recognize, value those positive parts of traditional masculinity.
That's bold.
Goes even further, says the lack of good male role models is part of why we have so many problems.
Interesting. I bet a lot of men would agree with that. Essentially, he's saying, don't be ashamed of being masculine.
Embrace it, use it for strength, purpose. That's his message. And this leads right into chapters 5 and 6, where he talks about men as providers and protectors. Again, rooted in biology and evolution, he says.
I'm seeing a theme here. So he's looking way back, using hunter-gatherer societies as examples.
Exactly. Showing how vital men's roles were back then for survival, the whole 9 yards. And he's saying, hey, those roles are just as crucial now, even though society's trying to blur the lines.
And that blurring, that's what's led to the emasculation of men, he says.
Creates confusion about their place in the world, their purpose.
Makes sense. I bet a lot of guys feel that pressure to suppress their instincts.
Absolutely. And Riker's saying it's not right. Men are being unfairly criticized for wanting to provide, to protect. Those are inherent qualities, not just something society made up, he says.
Interesting. So he's looking at both the past and the present.
Right. He talks about the challenges men face today, too, like women being the main breadwinners and how that changes relationships.
That's a hot topic for sure.
Riker encourages men to embrace providing. Says it's key to their identity, to feeling fulfilled.
And that ties right into marriage, he says. Men who provide, they're better equipped to take care of their families, build a stable home.
That's the argument. Powerful stuff.
It is. And then chapter 6, he goes into protecting, another role rooted in biology, he says. This instinct to protect, it's still essential, even with all the talk about nonviolence these days.
He's not shying away from those tougher
He
topics.
even uses examples like the military, law enforcement, showing how that protective instinct benefits society as a whole.
But of course he recognizes it's not always easy for men these days.
Right. Finding that balance between protecting amenity and what society expects.
It can be a challenge for sure.
So Riker's offering guidance on that.
He is. Encourages men to be assertive, confident, but without resorting to violence or aggression. It's a fine line, he acknowledges.
It is. And it leads right into his discussion on leadership in marriage, chapters 7 and 8. I'm curious to hear his take on that.
Well, he starts with the Bible, which makes sense given his overall approach. Quotes verses from Ephesians, the ones about wives submitting to their husbands. He's very clear men should be the heads of their households according to God's plan.
So traditional view, firmly stated.
Very much so. But he also says it's not about dominance or control. Love and respect, that's crucial in marriage. Husbands should lead with compassion, understanding. Even gives examples of successful marriages that follow this model.
Okay, so he's offering a kind of blueprint.
Exactly. But, of course, he knows this traditional view is challenged a lot today.
Right, especially with how feminism's evolved.
Still, he encourages men to hold on to their beliefs, lead their families with confidence, conviction.
Interesting, so he's not backing down from that traditional stance.
Nope. He even dives into decision-making in Chapter 8. Goes beyond just the Bible, cites studies, research showing men are more logical, analytical, he says. Women, more emotional, intuitive.
Now that's where things could get controversial.
Yeah.
Some people say those differences are because of how we're raised, not biology.
You're right, it's a debate for sure. But Riker's firm, these are innate differences. That's why men are better suited for tough choices, he says.
So he's sticking to his guns on that.
He is. Uses historical examples of male leaders who made big decisions. Of course, he says women can be good at it too, but their strengths lie elsewhere. Building relationships, resolving conflict, that kind of thing.
It's a perspective that might not sit well with everyone,
Yeah.
but it's part of this bigger conversation he's trying to spark about the different roles men and women play in families, in society, everywhere.
You got it. He's encouraging men to embrace being decision makers, but not in a domineering way. Communication, collaboration, those are important in a marriage. It's a partnership, he says.
So it's not just about barking orders, but working together, understanding each other.
That's right. He's suggesting a balanced approach, men using their strengths, but also recognizing the need to collaborate with their partners. A nuanced view, for sure.
More nuanced than some might expect.
And then Chapter 9 takes us into emotional strength in men, another big topic.
Definitely. This is where he challenges the idea of men being emotionally vulnerable.
Big time. He says it can actually be harmful to their mental health, their relationships. Instead, he focuses on emotional resilience, being able to handle hardship without breaking down.
Okay, so more of a stoic approach.
Exactly. He uses historical figures as examples. Men who faced incredible challenges but stayed strong. He even criticizes this pressure on men to be more expressive, more like women emotionally, says it makes them feel inadequate, ashamed.
I bet a lot of guys can relate to that feeling.
I think so. He encourages men to process their emotions, but in healthy ways, not necessarily by adopting what he sees as more feminine ways of expressing themselves. Having that support system of like-minded men is crucial, he says.
So a different way of processing, not what you typically hear in therapy these days.
Right. And it all leads into Chapter 10, where he tackles toxic masculinity. This is where things get really interesting, I think.
Oh yeah, that term's everywhere these days. I'm curious to hear his take on it.
Well, he pushes back hard against the popular narrative. Says the term itself is the problem. It demonizes traditional masculine traits, being strong, assertive, those things. He's saying masculinity itself isn't toxic. It's complex, has good and bad sides, like anything else.
So he's not denying that there are problems, but he's saying the whole concept is flawed.
Exactly. He gives examples of how he thinks the toxic masculinity idea is used to shame and control men. Points to double standards, how men and women are judged differently for the same behavior.
I can see that.
And he says this whole narrative hurts men's mental health, their self-esteem. So he's encouraging men to reject that label, embrace their masculinity in a healthy way.
So what's his definition of healthy masculinity?
He talks about finding a balance, strength and sensitivity, assertiveness and compassion. Expressing emotions, yes, but in a way that's true to being a man.
It's like he's proposing a redefinition, keeping the core values but adapting to how things are today.
What's a good way to put it? It's about being a man in the modern world without losing yourself in the process.
That's a powerful message.
It is. And from there, he shifts gears a bit. Chapter 14, he dives into men's physical health, specifically what he calls the male fertility crisis.
Oh, wow. I haven't heard that term before. What's that all about?
He throws out some pretty alarming statistics. Declining sperm counts in Western men. Cites a study saying there's been a 62% decrease over the past 40 years.
Whoa, that's a huge drop. I bet that would worry a lot of guys.
It's definitely something to pay attention to. And Riker explores all these potential causes: environmental factors, health issues, lifestyle choices, the whole gamut.
So he's looking at the big picture. What kind of things does he point to specifically?
Well, he mentions exposure to chemicals that mess with hormones, obesity, stress. Those are big ones. Also, how men live these days. More technology, less physical activity, that kind of thing.
That sedentary lifestyle. We hear about that all the time.
Right. And he's saying it could be affecting men's fertility, too.
So what's his advice? Just be more active, eat better.
That's part of it. He encourages men to take this seriously, make changes to improve their sperm health. He even advocates going back to more traditional ways of living. Natural foods, exercise, less stress,
Back to basics. It's interesting how he links this health crisis back to his overall message.
Absolutely. It's like he's saying the same things that are messing with men's roles in society, they're messing with their bodies, too.
It's a pretty provocative connection. I bet that resonates with some guys. Makes them think about things differently.
I think so. And from there, he moves on to something that a lot of fathers are probably worried about: the war against boys in education. That's chapter 15.
Okay, so he's getting into the school system now. What's his argument there?
He's basically saying the modern education system is failing boys. Schools are more geared towards girls, their learning styles, he says.
That's a common complaint these days.
It is. And Riker uses stats to back it up. Boys getting lower grades, dropping out more often. He says schools suppress their natural energy, their competitiveness.
Interesting. So he's saying boys are being held back, almost.
That's the idea. And he even suggests that there are too many female teachers, that's part of the problem.
Yeah, that's a controversial point. I bet that'll ruffle some feathers.
Probably. But remember, he's speaking to a specific audience here. Men who feel like boys are being underserved by the current system.
Makes sense. And does he offer any solutions?
Oh yeah, he's not just complaining. He advocates for some pretty big changes. More single-sex schools, focusing on hands-on learning, going back to more traditional discipline methods.
So shaking things up a bit.
Exactly. And he puts a lot of emphasis on fathers being involved, both at home and at school.
Taking a more active role in their son's education.
Right. It's about recognizing that boys learn differently and giving them what they need to succeed.
Interesting. So he's advocating for a more tailored approach to education.
Exactly. One that acknowledges the unique needs of boys.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground here. Riker's critique of modern feminism, the whole red pill concept, his views on traditional gender roles, men as providers and protectors, and now the challenges men face in education, even with their own health.
It's a lot to digest.
It is, and we're not done yet.
Nope. In part 2, we'll dive even deeper. Riker's analysis of relationships, family law, the workplace, and the solutions he proposes.
I'm ready for more.
Stay tuned. We'll be right back. All right, we're back. Still diving deep into Conrad Riker's Man's Guide to a Fulfilling Marriage and Family Life.
Last time we got a good overview of his ideas, but I'm really keen to hear more about those specific challenges he talks about, especially for men, in relationships, the legal system, even work, all those areas where they feel the pressure.
Yeah, he definitely gets into those nitty-gritty details. And, one thing that really jumped out at me, and probably a lot of readers, is this whole defiant wife concept he uses.
Oh, yeah, that one's a bit controversial, isn't it?
Yeah.
What's his take on that dynamic? I'm curious.
Well, remember, Riker's coming from a very traditional perspective, like very biblically grounded. So he sees a wife challenging her husband's authority as going against, God's plan for marriage.
So the husband's the head of the household, and when that's questioned, it throws everything off balance.
Exactly. And he links this back to feminism, those ideas encouraging women to reject traditional roles. He even compares these wives to Jezebel, from the Bible.
Whoa, okay, that's a pretty strong comparison.
It is. But for men who feel like they're not respected, not in control in their marriage, this part of the book might really resonate with them. It's validation,
I can see that. Finally, someone gets it.
Right. But Riker doesn't just stop there. He offers advice too, how to handle this dynamic. He uses biblical principles, but also practical strategies.
So not just being dominant, but also communication, seeking guidance from, like, pastors or counselors.
That's right. He emphasizes patience, love, understanding, but also firmness, setting boundaries. It's a balancing act, he says. Strong, but compassionate.
Interesting. A lot for men to think about there. Now, switching gears a bit, I know Riker also talks about family law, and from what I've heard, he's not a big fan.
Oh, yeah, he's very critical of the legal system, says it's biased against men, especially when it comes to divorce and child custody.
I can see why that would be a major concern for his audience.
It is. He uses some strong terms, too, like disposable men, describing how he feels men are often treated in court. It's pretty unsettling, but I think for guys who've been through a bad divorce, it might ring true.
Yeah, like he's putting words to their experience.
Exactly.
Right.
And he's got the stats to back it up. Mothers getting custody most of the time, men burdened with alimony, child support.
He also talks about parental alienation, right?
Yeah.
Where fathers are basically cut off from their kids.
Absolutely. That's a big one for him. He calls it a form of emotional abuse, and he says it needs to be addressed. The whole legal system needs reform, he argues, to be fairer to both men and women.
So what does he suggest men do? Does he just say they're doomed?
No, not at all. He's actually pretty proactive. He says, fight for your rights, advocate for changes in the law, seek support from men's rights groups.
So not just accepting the status quo, but actively working to change it.
Exactly. He also gives practical advice, like know your rights, get a good lawyer, document everything. It's like a roadmap for navigating a system that can feel very unfair.
That's helpful, at least. Gives men some tools to work with.
It does. And from family law, he takes us into the workplace, which is another area where he sees a lot of problems for men.
Yeah, I know he argues that even work has become hostile to men, especially those with traditional values.
Right. It all ties back to that societal shift he talks about, the toxic masculinity narrative, diversity quotas, a preference for hiring women, all that. He sees it as part of the same problem.
And he also talks about the economy, right? How traditional male jobs are disappearing.
Absolutely. The decline of those industries, automation taking over, it's adding another layer of stress, another way men feel squeezed out.
Like the world they knew, where their skills were valued, is just gone.
That's the feeling he's tapping into. And for men struggling in their careers, feeling like their role isn't valued anymore, this part of the book really hits home.
It's like he's validating their fears. But does he offer any hope?
Oh yeah, he's not just doom and gloom. He says, be adaptable, learn new skills, consider different careers. He's also a big advocate for policies that would create a more level playing field in the workplace.
So acknowledging the changes, but working to make them fairer.
Precisely. And
Yeah.
he talks a lot about networking, finding mentors, supporting businesses that are male-friendly, even starting your own business, being your own boss.
Interesting. So a mix of adapting to the system and creating alternatives outside of it.
Exactly. And a key part of that, he says, is building a red pill support network.
We touched on that before, but I'd love to hear more. What exactly does he mean by that?
He's talking about men connecting with other men who get it, who understand the challenges they're facing and can offer support, guidance, camaraderie.
Like a brotherhood of men going through the same thing.
Exactly. He suggests finding these networks online through men's groups, social events, basically anywhere you can find like-minded guys.
Makes sense. Having that support system can be so important when you're facing an uphill battle.
Absolutely. And he also stresses the importance of having male mentors, role models, guys who've been there, done that, and can offer wisdom and advice.
Yeah, it can be so valuable having someone to look up to.
It is. And along with building that network, Riker also talks a lot about self-care for men.
That's something we don't hear enough about. What's his take on that?
Well, he says men often neglect their own well-being. They push themselves too hard, don't take care of their health, bottle up their emotions, and it leads to all sorts of problems.
Makes sense. It's like that whole strong, silent type stereotype can backfire.
Exactly. And he blames societal expectations for that. This idea that men should just suck it up, be tough, not complain.
So they end up suffering in silence.
Right. And Riker's saying, that's not healthy. You got to prioritize your physical and mental health, eat right, exercise, get enough sleep, all that. And most importantly, seek help when you need it.
Even therapy, which can be a tough one for some guys.
Especially therapy. He challenges that stigma. Says it's a sign of strength, not weakness, to admit you need help.
That's a good message. It's okay to not be okay, even if you're a man.
Exactly. And he encourages men to find healthy ways to cope with stress, build those strong support systems we were talking about.
It all ties back to his red pill philosophy, doesn't it? Seeing the world differently, rejecting expectations that are harmful.
It does. It's about taking control of your life, being proactive, not just a victim of circumstance.
So not just complaining about the problems, but actively working towards solutions,
Right.
both individually and as a group.
You got it. And it's about redefining masculinity in a way that's empowering, that works for men in today's world.
It sounds like he's offering a pretty comprehensive blueprint, a way for men to navigate all these challenges.
He is. It's a call to action. Embrace your masculinity, fight for your rights, create a better future for yourself, your family, your community. That's his message.
It's a powerful message, for sure. But it's important to remember this is just one perspective. There are other viewpoints out there, and it's crucial to consider all of them.
Absolutely. And to think critically, not just accept everything you hear at face value.
Do your own research, consider different perspectives, form your own conclusions.
Right. There's no one-size-fits-all solution. What works for one man might not work for another.
It's about finding what works best for you, your own unique situation.
Exactly. And being true to yourself, your values, your vision for your life.
I like that. So before we wrap up this part of the deep dive, I want to leave you with something to think about.
Okay, I'm listening.
Riker talks a lot about men reclaiming their masculinity. But what does healthy masculinity actually look like today, in the real world? How do we balance strength and sensitivity, assertiveness and compassion?
That's a great question. And it's not an easy one to answer. I think it's something we all need to be thinking about, talking about.
I agree. It's a conversation that needs to happen. And it's a journey each man has to take for himself.
Well said. Sounds like a good place to pause for now.
Agreed. When we come back, we'll explore what Riker sees as the future for men, in a society he views as increasingly feminized.
We'll also dig deeper into the whole red pill philosophy and what it means for men, their families, and society as a whole.
Can't wait. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back to the Deep Dive. We've been spending some time with Conrad Riker and his Man's Guide to a Fulfilling Marriage and Family Life. It's been, well, intense.
Yeah, you could say that. We've gone through a lot, right? His critiques of modern feminism, all the challenges men face, relationships, the law, work, then building that red pill network, self-care.
And now the grand finale, right? The future of men in a feminized society. Big topic. Where does Riker even go with this?
This is where that red pill thinking really comes out. He's worried, no doubt about it. Worried about where society is headed.
I mean, we've seen it building up, right?
Yeah.
Gender role shifting, feminism gaining ground, men feeling disadvantaged.
Exactly. And he doesn't mince words. Talks about war on masculinity, men becoming second-class citizens. Says these trends, they're bad news for everyone. Men, families, the whole shebang.
He even brings up the rising suicide rates among men. Says it's connected to all this. It's a bleak picture, man. Does he offer any hope, or is it all just, like, downhill from here?
No. He's not giving up. He's actually calling men to action. Embrace the red pill, he says. Reclaim your place in the world.
So it's about taking that awareness, all those challenges, and doing something with it.
Yeah, channeling it into positive action. But what does that look like? That's the question, right?
Well, tell me, what's his recipe?
Traditional values, that's the foundation. Rediscovering strength, virtue, those masculine qualities he talks about, and rejecting, well, basically everything he sees as harmful. Feminism, progressive ideas, that whole package.
That's a pretty radical stance, like a complete cultural overhaul.
You could say that. He believes men need to step up, become leaders again, providers, protectors in their families, in society.
He keeps hammering that home, doesn't he?
Right. And that support network, it's not just a nice idea. It's crucial, he says. Men need to connect, share their experiences, lift each other up. That's how they'll get through this.
He even reminds guys they're not alone. There's a whole red pill community out there as he sees it. Men waking up to the truth, working together to make things better.
It's about empowerment, not defeat. Understanding the challenges, connecting with others, and taking action. That's his formula for a more just world for men, for everyone.
Powerful stuff.
Yeah.
But we got to be real here, right? This is just one perspective. Riker's vision of the future. Not everyone's going to agree.
Of course not. It's important to think for yourself. Listen to different viewpoints, weigh the arguments, come to your own conclusions.
Exactly. This isn't about blindly following anyone.
Right. But even if you don't agree with everything Riker says, I think his book is valuable. Makes you think about men, women, marriage, society. It sparks a conversation that needs to happen.
Absolutely. It's made us examine our own beliefs, hasn't it? about masculinity, gender roles, all those big questions.
It has, and it's pushed us to think about the kind of future we want, one where everyone can thrive, families are strong, society's fair. That's the goal.
Yeah, that's the goal. So as we wrap up this whole deep dive, I want to leave everyone with one last thought. Riker's calling men to action. But what does that mean for you? What can you do, starting today, to build that fulfilling marriage, that strong family, to make a difference in the world, even in a small way?
Good question. There's no easy answer, no magic formula. But maybe it starts with looking inward, examining your beliefs, your values. What kind of man do you want to be?
Take responsibility for your own happiness, your well-being. That's a good start.
And be brave. Stand up for what you believe in, even when it's tough. You're not alone. Remember that.
Find your tribe, your community, those who get it, who support you.
And if you want to dive deeper into Riker's world, check out his book, Man's Guide to a Fulfilling Marriage and Family Life. You can find it on Amazon Kindle and Google Play Books.
Yeah, it's a book that'll definitely get you thinking. Might even change your perspective. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. It's been real.
We'll see you next time.